Welcome to DIYEasyCrafts.com. Today we're going to take a look at how to create two-tone metal etching on stainless steel. For this particular project, we're going to be doing a hunting knife. It's going to have a woods background with a moose in the foreground. And this is going to be done on AEBL stainless, which is a high-grade stainless used a lot in custom knife making. It's the same material they make razor blades out of. Now, in the past, I've done quite a few videos on metal etching. Most of that has been on high carbon steel. So the whole stainless steel, or working with stainless steel, is kind of new to me. This particular project started out with not only cutting out the knife blank, but also doing the rough grinds. And I wanted that as a starting point to see where the bevels would end up being, on the surface of the blade. I do all my bevels on a Oregon Blade Maker 2x72 grinder, and I added a tilt table, which really makes not only grinding the bevels easy, but also going back and cleaning them up after heat treating is very simple. This knife is hollow ground, using a 10-inch wheel, also from Oregon Blade Maker. And it doesn't take very long. Anyway, once the rough bevels are done, this is all of the knives I was working on at that particular time. I chose the blank that had a good amount of surface area that would allow that etching to really be showcased. I then heat treated the knife, and I did a whole separate video on heat treating stainless. I'll put a link up for that. And then after the heat treating, I cleaned the surface of the blank. Now, before I get into that project, just a couple of things that I learned since I filmed this. Number one, I had been using a clear transfer film in order to transfer the stencils onto the blade. And I've always used the Silhouette brand transfer film. But the last couple of rolls, I haven't really been pleased with the results. It just doesn't transfer well. One of my friends recommended that I just go to the hardware store and pick up some clear contact paper. I did, and it works much, much better. So that's recommendation number one. Recommendation number two is I'm no longer holding my workpiece flat on a piece of cardboard or flat on a piece of plastic. I'm suspending it across two pieces of wood. And the reason for this is so that no moisture can get behind the blade and then inadvertently etch the back side of the blade or create a dark area on the back side of the blade. Very simple. You don't have to, elevate it too much. You could use, 1-inch piece of pine, anything. But you don't want your blade sitting on anything moist. For stainless steel, in the past I've always etched with a saltwater electrolyte. Doesn't work very well on stainless steel. So for stainless, I highly recommend going out, and for a few bucks on eBay, you can buy a stainless steel electrolyte solution, which works much, much better. So anyway, I cut out all of my stencils on a Silhouette Cameo craft vinyl cutting machine. Right here, I've already transferred the tree line vinyl onto the blade, and what I'm doing now is just cutting a couple of curves. These will be the hills that are going to be in the foreground. All of the vinyl is basically a resist. So anything that's exposed is going to get etched. So anything that's exposed is going to end up being dark, and anything that's covered is going to end up being shiny or light. This is a small cutout of a moose, which is what the customer wanted on this knife. I'm going to place that right on one of the hills. And then we'll start the actual etching process. Now, I use electro etching. I'm using a car battery charger. It's a 12-volt battery charger. It's set on 12 volts, 2 amps. I've got the positive lead clicked onto the handle of the tang of the knife. I've got the negative lead bolted onto a piece of angle iron, which I cut. I drilled a hole on one end for that negative wire, and on the other side, the side that's in contact with the blade, I just wrap it in gauze. And then I saturate that gauze with the electrolyte solution. You really don't want it to be soaking wet. You really just want it to be damp. And then I'm going to hold that in contact with the blade for 10 to 20 seconds at a time. Then I'm going to move down the blade and do another area. The end result is you want to etch every spot on the blade that you want etched for a total of about 2 minutes in no more than 20-second segments. The rationale behind this is that I don't want to overheat the vinyl and have that self-adhesive vinyl lose its adhesion. In fact, for this knife, I did basically 1 minute, and then I gave it a cool down period before I continued. Anyway, while you're doing this, just watch the heat a little bit. You don't want it to build up too much. So after every spot has been etched for a total of 2 minutes in 10 to 20-second segments, it's time to take off just the skyline of this particular vinyl. I'm going to leave all of the other vinyl in place to continue to act as a resist. And now I'm going to go get my moon stencil. It's basically just a circle cut out of vinyl. These craft vinyl cutting machines really do a nice job, with cutting very detailed images. You could certainly use self-adhesive vinyl that you get at a craft store and cut it out by hand with a razor knife, but I don't think you'll get anywhere near the detail that I get with this Silhouette Cameo machine. And they're not that expensive. I mean, I think when I bought it, it was probably about $150. Well worth it. So now I've got the moon in place, and I'm going to block out the rest of the knife also with vinyl. And now I'm just going to etch this exact same process, but the total time that I'm going to spend on the moon is going to be a total of 20 seconds. Because I want the moon to be the two-tone. I want the moon to be much lighter than the trees. And you can do this with any design concept you come up with. The whole woods hunting scene is just, what this particular customer wanted. So now you can see all of the etching is done on this side of the knife. I'm going to remove all of the vinyl. I'm going to clean up that blade a little bit. You can do it with soap and water. I just use a alcohol wipe. Then you can start to see what the finished blade is going to look like. Now don't forget, I still have to go back and clean up the final bevel on this knife. And I also have to just clean up the surface. You can do this either with a fine grit sandpaper, or I just went back to my OBM belt sander and put a Scotch-Brite belt on it and just polished it a little bit. Now I found with stainless steel there's absolutely no benefit to doing the etching prior to heat treating. On high carbon steel I always etch prior to heat treating because the background would end up getting much darker. But for stainless steel you don't get that benefit, so I'm etching actually after the heat treating. This is the final etching, the final product. And now all I have to do is, add scales and finish sharpening the knife and finishing the bevels, and this is the finished knife. A very easy process, done with a 12-volt car battery charger and electrolyte solution, as well as some self-adhesive vinyl stencils. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this YouTube channel. I'd also like to invite you to join us on our Facebook group, Knives and Knife Making. You can post images of your own builds and certainly ask questions. By all means, check us out on the web at DIYEasyCrafts.com. Have a variety of knife making videos available. Thank you very much.